The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the second day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 4th of Elul, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Monday, August 17th, 2026. We will read Parshat Ki Teitzei this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Parashah. Let's continue on learning Parshat Ki Teitzei. We'll go on to another mitzvah today, and this will be a lot of what we do in Ki Teitzei, because we're going to go from mitzvah to mitzvah. It's a sort of, the Parsha reads like a gigantic list of mitzvot, and we'll go into a mitzvah we don't talk about a lot, I think, in contemporary Judaism today, and that's the inheritance. How does Torah inheritance work? And specifically, in our case, with the double portion. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 15 through 17 is the second aliyah today, and it goes like this. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one, when he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot to him a double portion of all he possesses, since he is the first fruit of his vigor. The birthright is his due. So this verse basically commands and makes halacha, specifically the giving of the double portion to the firstborn son upon death as inheritance. And specifically, this is brought in the case of a loved and an unloved wife, in a case when a husband wants to switch the firstborn status and give the double portion to the son who has the loved wife. This is brought in this way because it's specifically of what we talked about in yesterday, about what happens right immediately before in the Torah about love, a wife that you gain in war as a captive, and that she becomes like a hated wife because of what you did. We talked about that yesterday. So that's how the Torah sort of moves to this piece of halacha. And so that's what we see here. Now, this is a very interesting halacha because it's something that in general we don't like to do anymore. We don't like to give a double portion to the firstborn son. And also, thank God, maybe we also want women to inherit equally to sons, to daughters, to sons. So the question often becomes, like, what happens if we don't want to do it this way? And actually, one of the most interesting comments on this, I didn't bring it in particular, was from Sforno, who says, actually, you don't have to behave this way. Why? Because, well, we see the patriarchs not behaving this way, like Jacob, for example, takes the Bechorut. He takes the firstborn status away from Reuven because of his poor behavior and gives it to Joseph. According to halacha, what Jacob did actually was, well, not according to halacha. There is an opinion that says that, which Sforno quotes and says this is what Jacob was doing, Rabbi Shimon bar Gamliel's opinion in the Gemara, but this is not accepted as halacha, and actually it's interesting, and therefore it seems Jacob did something that was against halacha by taking the Bechorut, taking the firstborn double portion away from Reuven and giving it to Joseph. Regardless, I think the more important question for us than rectifying Jacob's actions is, in our current world today as observant Jews, like, how do we actually fulfill this? I don't think most people want to give double portions to their firstborn son, and certainly want to give inheritance to their daughter. So how does this work? So there's actually many halachic ways to sort of deal with this. Because this is still halacha today, that when you pass away, the natural, what immediately happens upon death is that your son gets double the portion of all your other children, of all your other sons. And of course, women get nothing. What usually is done is that it's important for everybody to create a halachic will for your children that designates specifically what goes to where, and that this happens specifically right before you die, because once you die, obviously the possessions are no longer yours to will away. And so it really is a halachic living will, and it has to actually be executed before one passes away. Is the normal way in which this is situated, so that you no longer have access to that property, and then it wouldn't go through the natural way of Torah inheritance. So this is one of the halachic ways of actually doing this. There is a way of sort of doing it so that you do actually go through the inheritance, but it somehow forces the inheritor to distribute the money the way in which the parent wants to, which is sometimes what has been done is that immediately a massive debt is created for purposely for the firstborn son who is going to acquire the double portion, which that is eliminated if the firstborn son gives out that money according to the way in which the parents intend or will, and so that sort of gets around that the actual inheritance actually does go to the double portion son. But then, of course, everyone wants to avoid the huge, massive debt that they would lose anyway, all of that money, unless they distribute it according to the proper way. So those are really the two halachic ways that these are distributed. But whatever this is, it really shows the importance of actually creating a halachic living will, so that your inheritance is divided correctly. And even if it is divided correctly because you have a secular will, which most people have, at least to avoid the halachic transgression of it not going to the appropriate people, since, again, this still is enforced today. Halacha. Let's turn to the Mishnah Torah. We're still on the Rambam Mishnah Torah on prayer. We're in chapter 5. We're going to do halacha 10, 11, and 12 today, hopefully. Let's talk about bowing. All right, so bowing in the Amidah is important, and then ideally from the outset you should bow a number of times throughout the Amidah. I think a lot of people do make mistakes with this, so it's important to go through it, because actually we're really not supposed to bow any more than those times, and that's actually a pretty serious halacha that we should not be bowing anything extra. So these bows are specifically obligated by the Gemara itself, by the Talmud. So let's talk about them. Bowing, what is implied? One praying bows 5 times in each and every Amidah. In the first blessing, at the beginning and at the end. So in the beginning of in the blessing of thanks at the beginning and at the end, and upon completing the Amidah, one bows and takes 3 steps backward while bowing. Okay, so very important. A person bows in Baruch Atah Hashem in the beginning of the Avot prayer, and usually the way this works is Baruch, and he's going to explain exactly how this works. The Baruch Atah Hashem at the end of the Avot blessing, the Baruch the Modim Anachnu Lach part of the Thanksgiving blessing in the beginning, and the Baruch Atah Hashem of the Chatimah, the signature at the end of the Modim blessing and at the end of the Amidah, as he says. He continues, he takes leave from his left and afterwards from his right. Then he lifts his head up from the bowed position. When he bows the other 4 times, he does so at the utterance of the word blessed, and straightens up when reciting God's name. So let's first say, right, when we bow at the end of the Amidah, we take 3 steps and bow. We bow first to the left, then to the right, and he's going to get into why we do that in just a second. Then he says, he actually instructs us of how we're supposed to bow during the other 4 times. So this is for the first one, blessed, when we usually say Baruch. So when we say Baruch, blessed, and straightens up when reciting. So I'm sorry, I got lost for a second. So then he lifts up his head from the bow. When he bows the other 4 times, he does so at the utterance of the word blessed, and straightens up when reciting God's name. So usually the way this happens is blessed, you bend your knees, atah, you bow down, and then always right before you say Hashem, God's name, you always straighten up. And it's very important that we're not bowed over whenever we say God's name. Very, very important. To whom does the above apply? To an average person. However, the high priest bows at the beginning and end of each and every blessing. So the high priest has sort of an extra bowing obligation, an extra, obviously this is really about humility here and being in God's presence in a serious and an even more intense way. And a king bows at the beginning of the Amidah and does not lift his head until he completes his whole Amidah, right? The king has to say his Amidah like completely bowed over the whole entire time, right? Even more humility is needed for his station. So this is very important because I see sometimes in Minyan that people bow at the end of every Baruch Atah Hashem, and they do that at every Amidah. It's important not to do this. One, you're violating halacha, but two, you're also acting like the high priest. And so that obviously is a little egotistical, and we should not take that honor upon ourselves, and instead just bow the prescribed times that the Torah actually requires. Very important. Halacha 11. Why should one take leave from the left first? Because one's left is to the right side of his countenance, i.e., just like when one stands before a king, he takes leave from the right of the king and then afterwards from the left of the king. Thus, they established that one should withdraw from the Amidah in the same manner as he withdraws from before a king. So we bow to the left first, that last bow at the end, because that's God's right? And we bow then to the right because that's God's left. So we always bow to God's right first when we take leave. Halacha 12. All these bows require that one bow until the vertebrae in his spine protrude and he makes himself like a bow. However, if one bows slightly to the extent that it causes him pain and he appears to have bowed with all of his power, he need not worry, right? So he's saying basically do your best. But I think the important halacha here is we shouldn't bow too much. Rather, it's like almost like a half bow. We're supposed to just bend our back and like have our head go over, but not a full bow where we are bowing all the way down at a 90-degree angle, like a bow in some other societies. This is more just like a just moving head down and bending your back so that your spine protrudes a little bit. But that's it. It's actually against halacha to bow any more than that. Very important. Pirkei Avot. We'll continue on learning the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, and we'll move on to the commentary of the Rambam today, Maimonides. So again, a reminder of that first Pirkei Avot that we talked yesterday, and if you weren't listening yesterday, it's okay. We'll repeat it again. They said 3 things. Be patient in the administration of justice, matunim badin, be hesitant or impatient in doing justice, or raise many disciples, marbim b'talmidim, and make a fence around the Torah, su sayag l'Torah. All right, so let's take a look at what Rambam says these 3 pieces of advice mean. So for the first one, Rambam says, be deliberate in judgment, or matunim b'dim. He says the reason that we do this is that we shouldn't delay in reaching the verdict and not determine it quickly before they fully understand it, right? So the real reason for delaying is that you might not understand the law perfectly, and you might not understand how you should rule immediately. But then he actually describes a surprising reason why. As it is possible that new matters will be revealed to their eyes that were not revealed at the beginning of their thought. So he actually says, there's sort of 2 ways of sort of understanding this Rambam here. Number one, like, you might think one thing at the beginning, and because you've waited, you might have new thoughts or new analyses that you hadn't considered before. And when you really think of it and sort of think it over, you could sort of think differently and new thoughts can be revealed to you. There's also idea that, like, if this is a real court case, new witnesses can come forward and new facts can be revealed and to change the way you think than what you might have thought in the beginning. So you sort of have to wait for the witnesses to come forward and wait for new facts to arise. I think in our own lives, often this is, just about also like talking to other people before making a serious judgment, making sure that you have not, there's no thing you haven't considered that you've left out. So always leave room for new thoughts to come within your head. Never think that this is an easy decision. I know it, and that's it. The Rambam says around making a fence for the Torah is actually an interesting comment. He says, sort of similar to Rashi, that we need to make a sin around the Torah to stay away of Torah commandments in order to distance ourselves from transgression. But then he actually adds a Torah verse. As may he be blessed, stated in Leviticus 18:30, and you shall guard my guarding. And it was said in its explanation in Moed Katan 5a, make a guarding fence for my guarding. So it's not just advice to make a fence around the Torah, but rather it's actually a Torah mitzvah, right? We are actually required, the rabbis are actually required to make fences around the Torah, not as new Torah laws, but to establish as gezerot, as decrees, fences or rules that allow that distance one from actually transgressing a Torah commandment. So it's actually seen as an actual mitzvah, a Torah obligation itself. And I think like this also exists also for us as individuals. Like if we're going to violate a Torah commandment, and we know we have a tendency to do so, there actually is a mitzvah, I think personally, to make a fence around it as well for ourselves, in order to make sure that we personally don't transgress a particular mitzvah. So I think this adds a lot of strength to this practice that's actually a Torah requirement. So sometimes I think we get angry. Why do the rabbis have to make Judaism any harder? Like, well, why can't I have this or that? It's just a rabbinic commandment. We have to understand they're fulfilling a mitzvah by making these decrees. So this is par and parcel to what Judaism is these fences around the Torah, and it's great that Rambam helps us to understand that. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.